Gotcha. We okay? Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kasen, and this is Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day, and it's the 27th of May. And of course, yesterday, in celebrating Memorial Day, not exactly my number one holiday, as I've never been a gigantic pro-military kind of person, but then again, remembering that there were a lot of people who died, certainly not all Vietnam War people, lots of people in World War II, World War I, so I mean, this was not about just one war and not about all the politics of the 1960s, but of course, leave it to our dear leader, because he came out immediately yesterday and lived right up to expectations with numerous things that he had to say regarding Memorial Day, and just incredibly, of course, he did wish everybody a happy Memorial Day, whatever that means to him, which apparently is not much. But here's what he said. First, that he wanted to wish a happy Memorial Day to the scum who tried for the last 4 years to destroy our country. So why would somebody even talk like that? What's the point? Why would you start off your message with some description of past leaders of the United States as being scum? I have to tell you, of all the years that I ever protested against anything, I never called people in our government names. Well, let me back up. I've said racist. That's true. And that's a specific concern that we're going to talk about here this afternoon as well, because there's some issues that need to be talked about that have to do with racial unfairness in the country, which has gone on for hundreds of years. So we understand what that is. At least some of us do. But the scum part, and the part where you just call people names for really no reason and no direct purpose, no purpose whatsoever, just to be an idiot, to be insane. That's clearly what our dear leader loves to be, and he lives up to that every single time. Talking about our former president as scum, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days after he comes up with a cancer diagnosis, in which, Donald did say, for what it's worth, we hope that he's going to be okay. Well, of course, the truth is he's not going to be okay. He's got an advanced case of prostate cancer that has spread to the bone, and he's not going to be okay. There were a lot of ways that could have been talked about by a decent human being, but of course, our dear leader is not a decent human being. So, he goes on and he talks about how our people are scum. That's the people who ran the country for the last 4 years. But that's not all. He's got plenty more than that to talk about because, of course, one of his favorite discussions is the judges. So it's not just the executive branch leaders. It's not the prosecutors who found the opportunity to bring him to a courtroom and have him convicted of 34 counts of felony. No, not just them, but all the judges who actually, Donald explained, are actually monsters who want our country to go to hell. Where does he come up with this kind of talk? I don't even understand it. He could complain about losing his judicial cases. He could do that. He could say that he finds it unfortunate that the judges don't see eye to eye with him and his administration because of significant differences over what the Constitution means. He could say that. Wouldn't hurt him. Wouldn't hurt us. It would all be fine. But then he has to say that the judges are monsters who want our country to go to hell. So how does that advance the discussion? And of course the answer is it doesn't advance anything. It's foolishness. It's just bad talking that shows him to be the imbecile that we know he is. And, I heard some discussion, in fact, a good deal of discussion this weekend about the whole university issue. And I think that one ties very clearly into this whole thing about language. And the reason I say that is because, if you think about what Donald has claimed, first of all, he's claimed that universities are anti-Semitic, and he's outraged over that. Of course, Jews, like me, have really encouraged Donald not to try to protect us. Nobody wants his protection. You'll remember I've said many times before that there were two groups that increased their negative voting against Trump in the last election. One, of course, was the Jews, and then the other was black women. And I guess it's pretty obvious that black women were very, very smart in this, because I would have to guess, were prescient enough to understand that this would be a giant attack. This administration would be a giant attack against everything black in America. And if they weren't thinking that, then they must have been thinking something close, because that's exactly where we are. The attacks on museums, the attacks on black history, the attacks on diversity and inclusion. Hard to even understand what that's about. What's the guy upset about in terms of diversity? He was at West Point this last weekend talking about how his administration has saved West Point from diversity. Our dear leader, what a man. But anyway, we know these issues are out here, and certainly the university issue is one of the leading ones that I think is worth talking about. I mean, certainly you don't find professors of universities opening their class discussions with a conversation, for example, about the scum who have run our country. You wouldn't hear that. You wouldn't hear law school professors starting their lectures by talking about how judges are actually monsters who want the United States to go to hell. I mean, you wouldn't hear any of that kind of conversation at any university in the United States. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why Donald has had his former professors describe him as the worst student that they ever knew at Wharton. And there was actually a really good article this weekend about Donald and Wharton, and I wasn't even aware of this, but why would anybody be aware of this? But anyway, he tried to get into a lot of schools. He was rejected by everybody. Rejected by Harvard, rejected by Yale, Princeton. All the Ivy League schools rejected him. But he also was rejected by Wharton. However, his daddy went to Wharton with a substantial amount of money, and with a little help from some money, he got Donald accepted into Wharton. Well, again, like I've said, the Wharton professors all say he was their worst student of all time. And I think we can acknowledge that that's undoubtedly true, given what his reaction has been in this current administration having to do with tariffs. Because again, and I've made this point, and it's so worth emphasizing. Every high school student in America, and I mean everyone, if you've read a high school textbook, I assure you, you will get to the point where it says that in the 1930s, the destruction of America, the path into the Great Depression was preceded by the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. And ever since then, I mean, that's going back almost 100 years. Well, the United States government and, our experts, our real economists, not the quacks like Stephen Moore, who, that's just, one of Donald's quack economists that he follows all the time. But the point is that none of them have ever endorsed this idea of tariffs. None of them. But Donald apparently has been on this kick for, some people say 40, 50 years, that he has believed that if you upped tariffs, well, the money that would pour into the country from the people who paid the tariffs would cover, for example, our income taxes. The problem is the people who pay for the tariffs are actually the people who pay their income taxes. So if you were paying income taxes, you would be double paying. And if you were not paying your income taxes, well, you would be paying these tariffs, and so it would be coming out of your pocket. It would not be coming out of China's pocket. It would not be coming out of EU's pocket, nor UK, nor Canada, nor Vietnam. And Vietnam's an interesting case in all of this, because in the midst of all the lunacy that we've been dealing with, dear leader decided that he wanted a golf course, a Donald Trump golf course in Vietnam. And there was some unbelievable amount of money. In fact, I read that it was $1.5 billion. And maybe that's true, although it's hard for me to believe that it would require $1.5 billion to build a golf course. But whatever the number is, it's a big number. And Donald went to Vietnam and essentially said this. Essentially, he didn't say these words. None of us were there. But the deal was, if you build a $1.5 billion golf course, well, when it comes to the tariffs, we might cut you a deal. And this is a sad place where we find ourselves, because it's clear. Everybody that Donald wants to do business with gets some kind of an extortion plan that asks for something in return for favors that would come from Donald's administration. It's a sad state of affairs that we find ourselves with, but it's the way our government is run today. We have a government that wants something for the leader. Dear leader wants money, and lots of it. And actually, he needs money because, as an example, and I've talked about this before, but today was sort of a key day in the life of Donald's finances, because it looks like that crazy company of his that does nothing is back going down. It dropped over 10% today, and that cost Donald roughly $300 million. So, he got hundreds of millions of dollars from these meme coins that he's been selling, but now he lost $300 million. This is his personal money as a result of his stock dropping over 10% today. So he's going to have to come up with another scam. He's going to have to come up with some more coins that he would like to sell. He's going to have to come up with something. And listen, he's president of the United States. So there's enough power in all of that to come up with a scam a minute. And no question, he's accomplishing that much as we move forward. I know he's probably excited today because he managed to force the Dow Jones Industrial Average up some 900 points. Some of the other indexes even gained more than that. And I know that encourages Donald to believe that he's solving all of his problems. I do want to emphasize, however, that I haven't changed my view of this for a moment. And there are others who believe similarly, but I say it very specifically because it's a point that will affect our politics in a way that we've seen this before in some fashion. Herbert Hoover was destroyed in 1932, so we understand how that works. You create a depression, you're not going to be the most favored president for all the people of the country. And in this case, Donald is certainly putting us on that path. A 900-point up day in the Dow Jones does not negate all of the pressure that has taken the market down trillions of dollars from the high. And we know, I've mentioned that we're currently in what I would describe as a dead cat bounce. And again, I'm sorry for cat people who don't like that, but I assure you, again, that that's a long-held traditional description of a bounce that will go nowhere on Wall Street. We've called it that for over 100 years, so it's not me just being mean to cats. It's where we are. You know, you drop a cat off the Empire State Building, it will bounce. Yeah, about that much. So that's the story there. Certainly, Donald's company, whatever it does, it had a little dead cat bounce for a while, and it has been sliding ever since, back down to about $22 a share, on its way, I believe, towards zero. The company does nothing. Now, they're good at one thing. They raised $2.5, I believe it's $billion. I believe it is. And they did that just really in the last couple days. And here's what they did. Here's why they raised that money. This man's so ill. He wants to start some kind of a repository for cryptocurrency. And, you know, he's big on crypto now. And you understand why. Because people are giving him money for crypto that he is selling them. These are meme coins, which I don't even know what they do, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything about it because I know it's a scam. And actually, at some point, he may find himself on trial for what he's doing on this, that and airplanes that he gets from Qatar and all the rest of the extortion that he's involved in. That's coming. You know, he's, let's say, a half a year into his presidency, but, you know, we're about a year from the first election. That election in 2026 is, I think, going to be a landslide rout for the Democratic Party. I think they're going to take the House. I think they'll take the Senate. And I think that Donald will find himself basically in checkmate. Now, that might mean he can survive a little while longer while the investigations begin, and then the impeachments, and then the rest of the insanity. Now, I have to say, if by that time, if the markets have caved in the way I think they will, it may not be that difficult to get people in the United States Senate, even Republicans, to vote against this guy in a trial following the impeachment that would come from the House of Representatives. I mean, why not impeach him the third time? If anybody deserves it, it's certainly Donald Trump. He's done a ton to merit being impeached. This is not like Joe Biden, who did nothing. Passed some laws, increased the amount of spending in oil recovery. We've recovered an enormous amount of oil from shale, and this country today produces more oil than any country has ever produced on the planet, and that came through the Biden administration, not Trump, not drill baby drill, not that crazy talk from dear leader. No, it came from Joe Biden. And, you know, you might say, well, do we really want that oil? Is that something we want to do? Shouldn't we be pursuing clean energy? And I guess the answer is, in this case, because I don't like to give Donald anything, but in this case, there's probably some merit because we're a bit of away from the clean energy being in a position to be used routinely across the country. So we have to use some energy, and that's going to be from oil and other fossil fuel. So, okay, so we've gotten to that point. We are self-sufficient in oil, which has been true since the Biden administration, not Trump. And in the meantime, what does Donald have to do? Well, he has nothing to do, so he tries to wreck the country, and at the same time, and I think that these are coincident, they work together, and that is destroy the universities of our country at the same time. Tariffs are destroying our economy. I know there are new reports that show that our economic activity is on the downward slope. We have already had 1 quarter of contracting economic activity. That's the beginning of a recession. Don't get me wrong, recessions happen. Having a recession doesn't mean that the country's no good, but it does mean that given the fact that we started this recession right at the beginning of Donald's tariff attack against the rest of the world, I think we can conclude that this is something that has been specifically brought on by Donald Trump. And so I think he is, in fact, without calling names, I think he's trying to wreck the country. He's certainly wrecking our foreign policy, wrecking our economic policy. And again, there are specific things that he's doing. This is not calling him out as scum or any of the rest of it. There's no need for that. We already know he's a convicted felon. That is not calling names. That's what the man is. He's a felon who is convicted of those felonies. He's also been found to have raped a woman, E. Jean Carroll. So, again, this is not calling him names. This is not defamation. I mean, you can say it because the jury said it, and the judge reaffirmed the jury. The judge said, yeah, this is what he did. He raped the lady, and the jury found that he did it. So the man is involved in rape. The man is a convicted felon because he defrauded insurance companies and banks, according to the people in the state of New York. And he also defrauded our country through this process of messing with the election laws in New York, which brought him a 34-count felony conviction. I understand it was tied into this, they call it the porn star thing. But it's not about a porn star. It really isn't. Daniels is not the issue. The issue is clearly the election deception. And on that basis, the man was convicted. So, I mean, this convicted felon and this rapist, I mean, he is out here calling people names, people who have done really nothing wrong. And he's doing it in the name, at this point, of his hatred for the United States university system. Why does Donald hate universities? Well, I already said, there's some talk about his rejection from all the Ivy League schools. And then I guess, this talk from Wharton, where they say that he was the worst student that they ever had, that probably encourages him to want to get, retaliation as well. But give me a minute here. We're going to talk about some sponsors. We're going to actually not just talk about a university that helps people to think about business, but we're going to talk about some great businesses. And then in a minute, we'll get back here and finish the discussion tonight about universities and about a few other things along the way as well. So, let me start off by bringing up the St. Louis Suit Company. And of course, I always point out when I talk about the St. Louis Suit Company that, here I am on camera wearing one of my suits that I got at the corner of Central and Forsyth in Clayton, which is where you'll find the St. Louis Suit Company. Now, the ties are, one of the main attractions there. I mean, it's not the ties alone. I understand a lot of people don't even wear ties anymore, but many do. And a lot of people like to buy ties for a gift. And I'll tell you this, if you're buying somebody a tie for $5 and the tie looks like this, that's a nice tie. It's a classy tie. Normally, if you went to any normal retail men's clothing store, you'd pay $50 for the tie, but you buy it there at the St. Louis Suit Company for $5, and that's it. And every time I tell the story, people say to me, by the way, where is that place? Well, it's on the corner of Central and Forsyth, that's for sure. And, you walk in the door, you climb the stairs, and there you are. You're looking at what you can see on the camera, which is a whole bunch of nice suits and ties, and they've got shirts, and they've got shoes. And I'll tell you this, they've got overcoats, which, if you buy one over the summer, you're going to find yourself in really good shape come fall, because you're going to pay less money in the summer for an overcoat, and in the fall, you will need that overcoat. I promise you that. Anyway, they also do weddings. So if you're going to a wedding or you're having a wedding and you want to take care of the men in the wedding, you want to go to the St. Louis Suit Company because they're famous for the wedding attire. They do a great job. Jay, the father, Nick, the son, and the rest of the family, they're all there, and they've been there for 30 years. So they're doing a great job because they're still there. That is the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. So then if you want to go on to 4506 Hampton, you're going to find a really terrific jewelry store, and that is Jewels on Hampton. And it's run by the owner, Al, and his son, AJ. And they got some other, really nice people hanging around there too. It's just a great place to talk about jewelry, gold. This is a time when gold is just soaring in price. And, anybody who knows me would know that I would tell you anything that's soaring, well, you want to stay away from that. You want to buy it before it's soaring. So you don't want to go buying gold at this point. That's not my point in all of this. But if you want to buy and sell gold pieces, well, you can do that at Jewels on Hampton. They'll give you good prices. They're very fair, and they really want to help you design jewelry. They'll design it as well. They've got their own designs. They've got cases filled with jewelry. It's just a great store for anybody interested in buying new pieces of jewelry, and you want to buy from the right people who you can trust, who you will like, and that's Al and his group at Jewels on Hampton, 4506 Hampton. Now, if you're looking for restaurants, I've got a couple of really good ones for you. Certainly Telena's in Creve Coeur. You can't go wrong with Telena's if you're looking for Italian food. They've got pizza that people absolutely love. They've got all the good pasta. There's no question about that. My favorite is the spaghetti and meatballs. It's just great. I can assure you, the spaghetti and meatballs at Telena's, it's the best that you will get anywhere. If you don't believe it, just try. Check it out because you will love it anyway. Everybody goes to Telena's. I know I always say the St. Louis Suit Company's there for 30 years, and they've done a great job, but Telena's beats that. They've been there for 40 years. My best friend, Mehdi, he's just a terrific guy. and he runs a great restaurant, and you'll love it. And all the great food, you can't go wrong. You go to see Mehdi at Telena's on 141 and Olive. It's right there on the corner, easy to find. You got a Dierberg's in that little area where you buy all kinds of different things, nice shops. But Telena's is great, and they're there. 40 years, you'll love Telena's. You should go there. You should. Try them out. Spaghetti and meatballs. Make sure you do that. Now, I understand if you weigh a lot. You know, I try to keep my weight down, so I don't eat it like I would like to. But, hey, I eat it. Okay. Now, the next place you can go is Wenty's. Wente. Wenty's in Chesterfield Valley. And it's just a great restaurant with all kinds of different food. I mean, they've got hamburgers, they've got cheeseburgers, they've got terrific salad. No question, everybody loves the wings. They've got wings, I'm just telling you, everybody loves their wings. That's what people say that they go for, the wings. Now, again, I hate to be difficult, but for me, it's not the wings. They've got the greatest ribs, baby back ribs. They're so good. That's what I like at Wenty's, but you know, you go and you choose what you like. If you like the wings, that's great. They've got terrific iced tea. It's just a great place, nice restaurant. Ben, the owner, along with his wife, put all of this together and made it work really, really well. They're at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. They've got a great restaurant. You'll love it. And that is Wenty's. Okay. So we did a little business. Certainly more business than our dear leader has ever been able to accomplish. You know, I mean, this is not a matter of wanting to call him any kind of scum or, you know, I don't do that sort of stuff. But he is a loser. Sorry. I mean, the man has failed in business all of his life. Here's a guy who took a casino and put it into bankruptcy. A casino. Now, you understand, you know, people like casinos. They go and they spend their money, and they lose. You don't win at casinos. I mean, you might win this week, and then you go back for 4 more weeks, and you lose 5 times over. So you know, everybody knows, that casinos make money. So how do you bankrupt a casino? Well, he's got some real gifts. He does. And this is one of his gifts, that he'll take a business and he'll bankrupt it. And he's done this 6 times, 6 different businesses. And he's really quick to say, well, this wasn't me personally. This was just a business. And then he says, oh, you know, I'm smart because I use the bankruptcy laws. Well, I guess there's some sense to that. If you need to use the laws, you should use them. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, if you bankrupt a casino, well, it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign of excellence in business management. You know, one of my favorite movies, Lost in America, with Albert Brooks. What a great story that one was. I really enjoy it every once in a while. And they went to the casino, and Albert Brooks went to sleep, and his wife went downstairs and gambled away their nest egg, which they were going to use in order to live the rest of their lives, since they had left the dog-eat-dog business world, and now they were going to live quietly in America. But didn't work out so great, because they went to the casino and they did what everybody does at the casino. They lost. It's just the way it works. You know, you gamble in a casino, you're going to lose eventually. Now, Donald, of course, bankrupted a casino. Well, we get that. He also bankrupted a university. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. Trump University? Really? He just likes to put his name on things. But you know, dear leader wrecked that university in a very short period of time, if you want to call it that. They did teach things at a school called the Trump University. He ended up having to pay a $25 million fine because he defrauded the people who attended his university. Again, if you want to call it a university. And so I don't know, maybe Donald is retaliating because people made fun of his, quote, university. So he's going after every giant university in America, Columbia, Harvard, others. You know, he's demanding things. You know, it's, again, the whole extortion deal. But let me put it to you this way. And this isn't just Donald now. And this is Donald taking advantage of a problem in the country, which is definitely a problem. And that is, we have no real interest, no real belief in the value of our university system. We truly don't believe that our universities are doing us a service. I want to say, which, you know, I always do. Yes, I've taught for 25 years and taught 12 years at Fontbonne. But let me say this. Universities have an enormous value for our citizens, for the country. In the first place, when we send people to a university, we send them there not to get a skill. We don't send them there so they can become a plumber, or we don't send them there so they can be an electrician. Certainly they may study engineering. That's true. That might happen at a university. They might go to medical school and become a doctor. So that's sort of a how-to kind of a thing. They might go to law school, become a lawyer. That's also a kind of a how-to sort of thing. But let me emphasize this. That's not the primary purpose for our university system. Our universities really change the way people think. And if you don't believe that it changes the way people think, just remember this. Donald Trump wins elections, when he wins, with people who are uneducated, poor, and actually, in the case of, you know, we've heard from Hillary, you know, a lot of people were upset that she said it, but the fact is that, you know, they're deplorables. That's what Hillary called them. It's not nice, and we could actually help them to graduate from being deplorables to being university-educated people who would actually cause this country to boom even greater. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, you know, in the 1940s and 50s, when everybody came back from World War II, we sent them to universities for free. This country exploded with success as we educated our people who came home from war. Now, I know I get people arguing with me, and they say, well, the people today who want to go to school didn't fight. And my answer is, it's not about fighting. It's about what it does for our country to educate people by sending them to these universities. First of all, we create enormous success economically in the country. You know, think about this. Donald Trump's idea, tariffs. The 1940s and 1950s, our idea, that was of course Truman and then Eisenhower, our idea was create scholars. And those scholars did amazing things. For example, we wiped out polio. We wiped out the measles. This is all in the 1950s. We went to a system of university research that found the solutions that led to these vaccinations. You know, all the kids in school were vaccinated, and we wiped out measles and polio. I mean, that was an accomplishment. Why? I mean, if you don't ask, I'll ask. Why are we allowing the revival of measles and polio? I mean, why would we want Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? I mean, what a shameful thing that is, taking that name and running it through the mud after what Bobby Kennedy did as such a great person in our country. And now you take his name, throw a junior on the end, and you run it through the mud, because this is really a shame, because it's him. It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with dear leader who have come together to revive polio and measles in the United States. And, you know, I guess you could think of it like this. Make America great again for measles and polio. I guess that's the idea. I have no idea why Donald is doing this. I don't know why he wants to wreck the country. Every day he finds something new to do this with. And of course, today the discussion for me has been on the university story. But again, I really do think you will find that universities change the way people are. You are a different person if you've gone to a university. You just are. You know, people say, well, look at these liberals at these universities. I promise you, we don't indoctrinate people into liberalism at universities. I mean, what we do is at the universities, we help people to expand the way they think about the world, the way they think about other people, the way they think about research, the way they think about being a scholar. You know, we've got probably 200 million people in this country who think that being a scholar makes you some kind of a weird elitist. They don't understand that when you do research, that there's value. Now, the research that I'm involved in is all social science research, and I know that there are some people who think that's, you know, some kind of, I don't know, bizarre way of thinking about the world that somehow diminishes the value of those people who haven't read a good book. But that's not the purpose. That's not what it's about at all. And if we had more people that went to these universities, we'd have more people who would understand what it is that there's value for in going to a university. I know I was talking to somebody over the weekend. We were talking about all the books that some people have. I know I've got a house full of books. I got so many books, I haven't read them all. Of course not. I'll tell you this. There are some of the greatest scholars in the world that I've heard have these discussions about their bookshelves. And they will tell you that they've got bookshelves, and these are great historians too. They got bookshelves filled with books that they've never read. They aspire to read these books. And I know in my case, I mean, there's times I walk by the books and I'll grab one and I'll just say, you know, I'm just going to take a look. And I will read. Sometimes maybe not everything in the books, but I read them. Now, I will say that as a young person, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, okay? I read lots of books. I read them all. And you have more time then. You're not going to work every day. You can read more. Now, I read a lot, but I don't read as much as I read when I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I'll tell you that right now. I read everything I could get my hands on. I got to UCLA when I was 17 years old, and I read everything. I loved UCLA. But I understand there's some people in the country, and they're in the 100 million to 200 million range. They think it's all an attack on them. Now, if we had a president instead of dear leader who was encouraging people to go to universities, to read more books, to think about the world as scholars, well, we'd probably have a much better country. We probably wouldn't be sinking into the malaise that is really all over this country right now. When I say malaise, I know some people remember that was the word from Jimmy Carter. But you know something? There are numbers that we look at. For example, consumer sentiment. It's plunging. People are afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid that they shouldn't buy too many things. They're afraid that the prices are going to go up. They're afraid of everything. And that's thanks to Dear Leader. Dear Leader has brought us to this with tariffs, with anti-university, anti-intellectualism. And I will say, this is not new in America. There was a book when I was in college. It was called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. And I can tell you, it's a great book. I read it, I'd say, in 1968 or 9, right at the beginning of college. And the interesting part about it is that at that time it was a brand new book that was, everybody was talking about it. Today, they still read it at universities, and now it's considered to be a classic, and it is. And there are a lot of interesting books like that, certainly in my life. And like I say, I love books. I buy books for students. It's kind of a cool thing. I know a lot of students will say to me, gee, a book, really? And I say, well, if you don't want a book, don't ask me. But if you want a book, just come to me and ask me, and I will buy you a book. And I do. I buy books for students, and I like doing it. I'm certainly hoping to encourage them to go on to universities because I believe that it will be meaningful for their lives. So, that's my thing. I'm not saying that you've got to spend your whole life sitting at a desk and reading books. I'm not saying that. I'd like you to read more books, But how about this one on Donald? Here's one. I really like this. And again, I know, some of us make fun of each other in different ways, and this is a way to make fun of Donald. But it's not. It's not like calling the president and his advisors a bunch of scum, and it's not like saying that judges are monsters who want to send the United States to hell. I mean, it's not like that. But here's the funny part about it, that there's a joke going around that says that the Donald Trump library has burned to the ground, and that all 2 of the books in the library have been destroyed. So that's, one part of the joke. And then the other part of the joke is they say that the tragedy of it all is that of the 2 books that burned, that he never had a chance to color in the second one. So, okay, that's Donald. He doesn't read. We know he doesn't read. In his first term, when he won the office, one of the protests was that we sent Donald a book. All over the country, thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands, more, sent him books to the White House, and that was a protest against the fact that he didn't read books. And I can tell you, I sent him a book. It was a book written by a guy named Abbie Hoffman, who right now probably people wouldn't remember, but he wrote a book that was called Steal This Book. And it was a joke. It was making fun of anti-intellectual people in America at that time, again in the 60s and 70s. And, I just think that, we would do ourselves just such a tremendous service by teaching the value of learning, by supporting universities, by not telling foreign students who come to the greatest university system in the world to go home, that we don't want you. Harvard was told that they couldn't have their students from other countries come here anymore. And over the weekend, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal that pointed to the fact that Donald denies that students from foreign countries who come here pay full price for their education. He denies it, but they do. They pay full price. Those of us who come from the United States, we don't. There's nothing wrong with that either. I can tell you right now, like if you go out of state, you're going to pay more than if you go in state. So if you're in the United States, you do get a benefit from the fact that universities will, they may give you a scholarship, they may give you some kind of a reduced price. There are a lot of different things that happen. But I will say this, and I recall very well as in the days when I was teaching at Fonpon, my students, university students who came from Saudi Arabia and China, they paid full price. Now, in a lot of those cases, the government of those countries paid their tuition. But it was great for the university because they got full tuition. And, these students who came from these foreign countries were very serious people in school. They loved it, and they wanted to learn. They soaked it up. They loved the American system. And believe me, Fonpon was not Harvard. Don't get me wrong. But universities across this country, real universities, do a great service for our country. Now, research universities, that's another point altogether. And in the case of Harvard, for example, the research that they do to try to get rid of cancer, the research that they do to try to get rid of Alzheimer's, the research that they do to try to destroy ALS, Lou Gehrig disease, all the things that they work on are significant problems in this country, problems that we want to see solved and which can sometimes be solved by the foreign researchers who come here from other countries and work with our American researchers at the same time. I just have to tell you that the value that we have, that we get from our university system is so exceptional that there's no way to overstate how great these universities are, because they are terrific. And in the meantime, what does our dear leader do? He wants to destroy universities. Instead of celebrating universities, he wants to have a giant parade on June 12th, which of course 2 days before his birthday, and he wants tanks all over the streets of Washington, D.C., missiles. He wants to make it look like the old days in the Soviet Union. And that's not us. It really isn't. I understand it is Donald in a sense, because it's some kind of a celebration of his life. That's what he's all about. He doesn't care about the fact that our universities are great, and that even in some cases, some of those weapons that are created, I shouldn't say some, many cases, those weapons are a result of university research as well. I certainly know people who were PhDs in thermonuclear dynamics and who worked on the atomic bomb back in the 40s and the 50s, and some of the work that came out of that period. And, you know, I also know people who did that. One specifically who went back after he had his PhD in thermonuclear dynamics, and after all of that was created, he went back and got a further degree in biomedical engineering, and he got that at UCLA, and then he worked on all kinds of programs that were involved in the research that I'm talking about, which helps us to resolve some of the diseases that we have to live with right now, which we may find someday that we're able to overcome. But it's going to only be through our university system. It's not going to come from the deplorables. It's not going to come from uneducated poor white people who hate blackness in America and who demand that Donald take all the exhibits out of museums. That's not how it's going to end. It's going to end in terms of solving diseases through Harvard and Columbia and Stanford and places like that. And right now, you know, I'm going to end all of this by saying goodbye. You know, I'm Mark Kasen, and this is Showdown. Be back on Thursday. See you then. Good night.